Welcome back to another episode of Bridge the Gap. I am your host, Nikki Steinhauer, and today we are diving into the transitional phase of my healing journey. It's a tale of living out of my car, juggling 3 jobs, attending college, and playing college soccer. Talk about a superhero origin story, just without the cape. So picture this. I am fresh out of high school. I suddenly am thrown out into the real world, just kind of like a toddler at a piñata party. Lots of excitement, but mostly just chaos. I was a sheltered kid who suddenly had to fend for herself. And it was kind of like going from this cozy cocoon to just being thrown out into a blender. And trust me, it was not a smoothie. It was kind of like a fruit salad of stress and confusion. After high school, as I mentioned previously, I was living out of my car. I moved out. I was working 3 jobs. I guess you can say I was versatile, kind of like a Swiss Army knife, but with less utility and more exhaustion. Okay, I worked at an airport restaurant as a hostess, a waitress, and occasionally as a dishwasher. I also worked at a sports store called Modell's as a cashier, as well as a cashier on a farm, all while I was attending college and playing soccer. It was a real struggle for me to be sheltered as a child to kind of getting just thrown out into the real world with no real support or direction. I always had to fend for myself, but it was kind of on a whole different level. In order to keep my full ride scholarship for my Division I school and maintain my position as soccer captain, I had to juggle classes, work, and grades, kind of like a circus performer, which, a lot of college kids do today. It's not a big deal. The reason I got my scholarship was for soccer, and I was team captain as a freshman. I mean, not to toot my own horn, but, beep, beep. I was pretty good at soccer. I actually have a whole box of, just a couple of the trophies that I had collected as a child that my husband teases me about. It's this heavy box that he hates lugging around every time we move. I had gotten, all state, all county, my soccer team in high school, and we were all inducted into my high school Hall of Fame. And we were actually on one of those welcome signs for our towns as you enter and you leave. It's pretty cool. I made our history for our town, but I always mess with my kids when they say I'm old. I just agree and I tell them, you know what? You're right. Your mom is so old, she's in a museum. So anyways, I couldn't miss any soccer practices or any games. I was living out of my car, so I couldn't miss a payment on my car or my insurance. And since I wasn't allowed to have a job in high school, this was my first time working and making money. I will admit, I had no idea how to manage my money at that time. I was just like most young adults. I didn't know how to balance my checkbook. I was just kind of swiping my debit card, praying to the bank gods, hoping it went through. And since I had no more rules to follow, you could say I kind of rebelled a little bit when I could. I treated myself on days that I didn't have school or work by going to the beach. My new friends invited me to parties, so I went. I spent so much money on gas and traveling and just exploring. It was the perfect yin and yang of extremes. I was free. I did what I wanted. I escaped to the beach. I had no rules. I had so much real freedom in the first time in my life. But on the other side, I was drowning in schoolwork, exhausted and stressed from going to work and physically exhausted from soccer. I was just on the hamster wheel of chasing money, thrills, and survival. And if you've ever experienced this, you know how exhausting it is. The stress and the weight of it all came crashing down on me because the lifestyle I was living, it just wasn't sustainable. I felt everything come at me closer and closer, and it eventually began to feel as if I was beginning to suffocate. And I just couldn't do it anymore. I needed an escape. Having been sheltered as a child and then being thrown into this whirlwind, I experienced a lot of what researchers call adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. And studies show that when kids lack consistent support, it can lead to long-term emotional challenges. And I was just trying to figure it all out, how to pay my car insurance, my car payment, while feeling like I was just suffocating. It was like I was in a financial escape room, and my only clue was my debit card. And I guess my sister was feeling the same way because around this time, she had asked me to go with her to take the military ASVAB because she was thinking about joining the military. She just kind of called me out of the blue one morning, and I kind of said, "Sure, I'll come with you. I'll support you." Never in my life thinking that I would ever consider it or that I needed that score. So I just went ahead. I guess winged it. I don't know. But a few months later, the pressures of the real world were just a little bit too much for me. Like I said, I just felt like I was suffocating and I needed an escape. So I ended up joining the military. I had to lose about 7 pounds to join. That freshman 15 sneaks up on you really quick. So I just didn't eat anything for about 2 weeks and I made weight and I was ready to go. I remember being really hungry and eating. I mean, I guess you could say eating, but I was eating a piece of pizza, putting it in my mouth, chewing it, and spitting it into the trash. My friends just looking at me like I was absolutely insane. But nothing was going to hold me back from leaving. The day before I was going to leave, my mom asked me to come over and have dinner as a family one last time before I left, and I hesitantly agreed. And she said she would tell my dad to be good, so I went ahead and I joined them. They had gotten Chinese takeout from our favorite place in Philly that actually was an award winner as well in Chinatown. It was David's My Lai Wah. It was so good. But my mom knew that I had to lose weight to leave, and she asked why I wasn't eating, and I told her that I had to be weighed in again before I left, and that if I don't make weight, I can't go. She tried forcing me to eat and guilt tripping me to eat, saying, "A little bit of beef and broccoli isn't going to hurt you. A little bit of rice, it's okay. It's not going to add pounds onto you." But for the first time in my life, I did not cave in and I said no. And then I left for the hotel shortly after and then went to the airport. And as I got on the plane and arrived at Lackland Air Force Base, it all felt a little weird, to be honest. There were people walking around crying, getting yelled at. One girl became known as Hickey because her boyfriend marked her entire body with hickeys before she left. But it felt very assembly line, take this shirt, take that pair of shoes, take this shot, take that shot. When the drill instructors came into our barracks to raid our belongings, girls were crying, screaming, running around. And I remember having 3 drill instructors in my face all at once yelling at me, calling me names. But I just did what I always did. I allowed myself to temporarily exit my body as I just stared at them in their eyes and as they were yelling. And I didn't flinch when they were throwing things at me or they were destroying my belongings and throwing my stuff all over the floor. Looking back, I think I might have scared them or confused them because after about 10 minutes of being yelled at by 3 grown men with no reaction on my face, they kind of just left me alone. They probably thought this girl is either broken, stupid, or she is just a complete psychopath. Not knowing that I could access these in-between experiences at will, I have really tried very, very hard to find a logical explanation for the state I can put myself in. However, the concepts that I have found are astral projection, out-of-body experiences, disembodiment, remote viewing, and disassociation. But none of these fully encapsulate what I refer to as the in-between, because astral projection is this phenomenon that a person's consciousness kind of separates their physical body, allowing them to travel outside of it. An example of this would be someone floating above their sleeping body and observing their surroundings from above. An out-of-body experience occurs when someone feels as if they are perceiving the world from a location that is outside of their physical body. For example, a person might report seeing their own body from a distance while having a near-death experience. Disembodiment kind of refers to the sensation of being detached from your physical body or feeling as if your body is not present. An example of this could be someone experiencing a deep meditative state and perceiving their thoughts and their emotions as separate from their physical body. Remote viewing is a practice that kind of involves attempting to perceive or describe details about a distant place using ESP or extrasensory perception. And it's often associated with psychic abilities, and it's been subject to multiple studies, particularly during the Cold War for military operations. A famous instance of remote viewing would be the Stargate project. It's just a government program that explored the use of psychic abilities in intelligence gathering. This is just where trained remote viewers would be asked to describe a hidden location and gather information about an object or a person without any physical access to it, using their third eye or their mind's eye to gather information, resulting in descriptions that the person would receive intuitively or mentally without have ever being at that place or seeing that person before. And then disassociation, this is a psychological process where a person feels disconnected from their thoughts, feelings, or from their sense of identity. And an example of this is when someone who has experienced trauma finds themselves feeling detached from reality and as if they are observing their life rather than being an active participant in it. Yet, none of these definitions, and as I go through their studies, none of these definitions really quite capture the essence of what I describe as the in-between, of where I can step out of my body but still be very present in my body. So anyways, basic training to me, to be completely honest, it was kind of a joke, just being 100% honest. The yelling and the screaming, it was nothing new. The PT, the physical fitness, it was easy because I was already physically fit. Yeah, I had to lose a couple pounds to get in, but I was very muscular. I already knew how to do the marching because I was in JRTC and I did the drill team. I even won the Warhawk Fitness Award and earned extra town pass time. I remember having to run the 1.5 miles to get categorized by time for a morning PT. They told me what group I was in. I was in group A, so that was the group that I would have to run with every morning. And when I got to group A, the first PT session in the morning, let me just tell you how confused I was. It was 5'2" me with all of these super tall, lanky, 6-foot dudes. And because from day one, they had told us, do not speak to any of the males. I was even more confused, okay? So I had asked if this is where I was supposed to be. And the drill instructor, he told me, yes, that's where you're supposed to be. I eventually realized that we were categorized by runtime through A, B, C, D, whatever lane we were supposed to be in. And me running my fastest during the categorization time forced me to keep up with these extremely fast dudes every single morning. And I do just want to take a quick moment to stop right here and reflect. One thing that I always tell my clients is to notice the repeating patterns in your life. Or if you do not see any yet, to journal about what's going on with you so that way you can heal and learn from your past experiences. For me, Can any of you guys guess one of my repeating patterns that I have mentioned here in this podcast yet? If you're able to comment, go ahead and comment what you think it may be at this point in the podcast. I'll give you guys a moment as I go into explaining what a repeating pattern is. So, in spirituality, a repeating pattern refers to recurring experiences, challenges, or situations that seem to show up in your life in different forms. And these patterns often reveal unresolved emotional wounds or limiting beliefs or lessons that you may need to learn in order to grow spiritually and emotionally. The people or the environments may change, but the underlying lesson is always the same until you can learn and grow from them. So, the universe pretty much provides opportunities for growth and healing through these repetitive experiences. And until the lesson is learned, the pattern is going to persist. So, just an example of this is if someone repeatedly finds themselves in toxic relationships, it may be an invitation from the universe to heal something within you, such as self-worth issues, or for you to set healthier boundaries around your energy. And this concept aligns with the idea of karma or the law of attraction. Situations kind of manifest to reflect unresolved inner work. It's kind of like a mirror. Okay, so if you guess my repeating pattern at this point, and if you've guessed that it was being yelled at and broken down in order to be controlled and not being allowed to talk to boys, then you would be absolutely right. These are just a couple patterns that you might have picked up with some of the information that I've given you, but do you think I realized this lesson yet? Nah, no. I just wanted to keep going through the training to ensure I got it right. My perfectionism. So, yeah. Basic training, it really was nothing for me. I know that sounds really cocky and everything, but it was actually kind of peaceful in a way, if you can believe that. I remember making some friends, even had one girl tell me she couldn't have made it through Beast Week without me. It's just this intense week of training. I say intense, but like I said, it was kind of a joke where we crawl through the sand with our rifles uphill, and she kept stopping. She was in front of me, so I had to keep yelling at her, kind of encouraging her to not stop crawling, to keep going, to get over the hill so we wouldn't get shot at, basically. And she was yelling back at me during this time, but I just continued to yell at her and encourage her to keep going, to not stop. And she thanked me afterwards. And I didn't think that I did anything special, but, just like that dad who picked me up for my soccer games every weekend, sometimes we don't know how our words and our actions impact other people's lives. But I know I wasn't a godsend to everyone at Basic, because there was one time where we were able to call our families. It was the second time we were able to call. The first time was the first night when we got there to tell our families that we had arrived, and we gave them our address. My parents didn't answer the first time, and the second time it was no different. It was probably around week 6, I want to say, and we could finally call home to tell our families of our graduation date, to give them all the information. And my parents, they didn't answer again. So I just started walking up to the dorm, and my TI, or my tactical instructor or training instructor, I don't really know what they're calling them these days, but he had asked me why I wasn't crying. And I said, I wasn't aware we were supposed to be crying. Well, it was more like, sir, trainee, reports as ordered. I wasn't aware we were supposed to be crying, sir. And he said, did you say hi to mommy and daddy? And I said, I told him that they didn't answer, so I left a message. And then he asked me again, why aren't you crying like everybody else? I had absolutely no idea what to say. I was just like, I don't know. So I just replied with, I don't know, sir. I didn't feel like I had anything to cry about. So that was probably the worst thing I could have said, because he had told me that since I was the only one not crying, because some people were happy crying, some people were sad crying because, their family didn't answer. So he had told me that I had to stand at the front door of our dormitory and tell everyone coming upstairs, coming up from the payphones, that they are not allowed to enter the dorm if they are crying, and that there is no crying in the dormitory. And I am pretty sure that people really disliked me on this day because I just remember saying really loud, that way he could hear me, "There is no crying in the dormitory," as the girls were walking through, just giving me these disgusted, confused looks. And then I would silently lip to them, "I'm so sorry," as they were kind of walking by. I just felt like such a jerk. But even though my parents didn't answer, I did write my mom and I told her when I would be graduating BMT, basic military training. And at my graduation, I was super excited. I was ready to get out of there. I was ready to keep going and start my life until I felt my stomach fall. My dad showed up at my graduation. And I remember thinking, why the hell is he here? Why would my mom bring him here? It is the weirdest thing because my dad came over with tears in his eyes and he told me how proud of me he was. Again, the intense confusion rushed over me. Studies show that narcissists and emotionally immature parents often avoid taking responsibility for their actions. Instead, they use denial or blame-shifting tactics. They pretend that everything is fine rather than addressing conflicts. According to research, narcissistic parents often struggle to understand their child's emotions or needs, leading to feelings of neglect in their children due to their parents' inability to empathize or show empathy. Emotionally immature parents also tend to dismiss their child's feelings, which can cause confusion and harm in the child's emotional development, leading to feelings of emotional invalidation. So children of such parents may grow up feeling unseen, unheard, or unworthy, which can lead to people-pleasing behaviors, low self-esteem, or even difficulty forming healthy relationships. It can also lead them to accepting their feelings as invalid and sweeping them under the rug and just moving on or moving forward with their abuser because of their lack of boundaries as well. And that's exactly what I did, what I always did. I forgave and I moved on without an apology and with these high hopes that things would change. So I just kind of went with it. I didn't really know what happened in the 2 months that I was gone. Maybe things finally changed. Maybe my dad kept his word. Maybe he changed. Maybe things were different. I don't know. So they all walked over to me. They all asked me what I wanted to do, and I had no idea. All I knew was I wanted some different clothes. I wanted to get ready for tech school. We did have some fun. We explored the Alamo. We did some things on the Riverwalk. I kept telling my parents that I needed to be back at a certain time, but of course it didn't matter to them. They thought me stressing out about getting back on time was funny and it was a game. So, of course, they dropped me off late. So I had to walk back into the barracks and act like nothing was out of the ordinary, like I was just coming back from the mailroom or from laundry. I think my instructor knew, but he didn't say anything. But either way, I was off to tech school the next morning. The next morning was exciting because it meant that I got to go somewhere and start to learn my job. I got my folder with my information and I waited for the bus to arrive. And I saw my bus and I got in line. Instantly, fear came over my entire body. Again, I was the only girl in a sea full of guys. I started scrambling through my paperwork, checking it over and over and over again, making sure the bus number matched, making sure it was my name on the paper, that it was spelled correctly, that my social security number matched. I started to panic. The line started moving as people were piling on to the bus. I got on the bus hoping that there was somewhere in the back of the line a female that was going to come on after me. The bus door closed, and I sat there thinking, well, maybe they thought I was a guy. Maybe they thought Nikki was a male name, not realizing that the job that I signed up for was a male-dominant career field. All I heard was, do you want to travel the world and get your name painted on the side of an airplane? Yeah, they got me with that one. So I got to tech school, I settled in, and as I met with the dorm manager, you wouldn't believe this, but I was told to not sleep around by the male dorm manager and that the rate of STDs was high. And then a little later, I was told by the female dorm manager to not sleep around as well. And then a few days later, I went to my first class to learn my job as a crew chief. And I did a few months of training. I met some cool people. And then I graduated. And then after graduation, the instructor pulled me aside and he told me that when I got to my first duty station to please not sleep with any of the guys there. He said, you are a beautiful young woman. You're smart, but please don't sleep around when you get there. And I just remember looking up at him like, why in the world does everyone just think I'm a whore? Like, I just don't understand. Why does everyone just think that I'm just disrespecting myself and my body? And it just made no sense to me. And when I got to my first base, I was told to try not to sleep with people in my own squadron, or at the very least in my own shop. Anyone else picking up on another one of those repetitive patterns here? Again, you know me, I need all the training that I can get. But looking back now, I do understand that all of these people, they weren't calling me a whore like my father used to. They were trying to protect me from a male-dominant workplace. They saw what had happened in the past with women in male-dominant workplaces. At that time, the rate of female sexual assaults was very high. So they were just trying to protect me. But at the time, because of my childhood conditioning and through the lens that I was coming from, I just thought that every single man of authority looked at me like I was a piece of shit whore who was trying to throw her body around, not understanding that most of these men just saw an innocent, naive girl, and they were trying to protect her. In case any of you are wondering, this was probably not the best way to approach the situation. I just remember feeling so uncomfortable during each and every one of those conversations, feeling like I was in trouble for doing absolutely nothing and for planning on doing absolutely none of these things these people were bringing to my attention. It was just a very unusual circumstance and situation because the only adult in my life that would ever openly speak about sex to me was my father. So I was completely uncomfortable. And I couldn't imagine a conversation like that happening in the military today. I even remember my supervisors coming up to me every time we got a new girl in the shop and saying, you need to go over there and go have that talk with her. The talk being basically, don't shit where you eat. Every single girl that we would get into the shop, I would have to go walk over to her and have the talk. And if you are one of those girls, I just would like to say I am so very sorry that I ever had that diminishing, demoralizing conversation with you. I was just following orders, but I know better now, and I hope that you can sincerely forgive me. Please know that hurt people, unhealed people hurt people. Sometimes we are just so unaware of our actions. So again, I do sincerely apologize if you were one of those people. And again, instead of me sleeping around when I got to my first base, anyone who is military is going to laugh about this, but I met my husband at my first duty station in FTAC, the first term airman course, where they basically teach new airmen how to be a productive member of the community and show them around the base and give them resources. Well, I met my husband during this class. He was a little punk, but there was just something a little bit different about him. He saw me for me and he respected me, and we always just had a lot of fun. So We ended up dating, getting married, having a few kids. You guys know how it goes. I'll spare you guys all the mushy, lovey-dovey details. But our life was all over the place. It was never stagnant, never a dull moment. We bought our first house when I was 21 years old. We had our first baby when I was 22. We got pregnant during our honeymoon. We should have known it was going to happen real quick because everyone was teasing us at our wedding when it was raining right after our ceremony. If you guys don't know, it's an old wives' tale that says you are going to be blessed and fertile if it rains on your wedding day. So we had a beautiful baby. And then a year and 3 months later, my husband and I, we both deployed. At the time, we were both young and figured we could just knock out a quick 6-month deployment to get it over with together instead of one of us getting sent and then as soon as one comes back, then the other one gets sent and being gone and separated for a whole year from each other. And we did have the support of both of our families at that time when it came to our new baby. Plus, we were both going to be at the same location, so at least that was a plus. But man, was I wrong about a seamless 6 months. During this deployment, I thought the worst thing I had to worry about was missing my child. Over that 6-month period, I had developed chronic reproductive issues that left me in extreme pain. Without going into too much detail, I realize now, with all of the training and energy work that I've done, that of course I would have developed this energetic block in an area next to my root and sacral systems. The systems that rule your foundation, your basic needs, your nervous system, your family, creativity, and ding, 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 reproductive area. It was all off balance. So of course this energetic block would show up in the physical. I've ignored it for such a long time. I was about 4 months into my deployment when this pain was so unbearable that I had to go to the clinic and be seen. And they basically told me that there was nothing that they could do for me at that base and that I would either have to stick it out or be sent home. And you all know me by now. There was absolutely no way that I was getting sent home early from a deployment. Because let's face it, if you're a woman in the military, you know what that means. You've got to put on your brave face and pretend everything is A-okay. Because if I left early, it meant she couldn't handle it. She missed her baby. See, this is why girls shouldn't be in the military. This is why girls shouldn't be deployed. Plus, there was no way that I was going to leave early and have everyone else pick up my slack. Absolutely not. Not even if I could barely walk. Or my reproductive system feels like it's getting torn out of my body every single second of the day. Nope, not me, not Miss People Pleaser. I had a job to do. I had deployment goals that I was trying to meet. I couldn't let anything hold me back from performing, even if it meant putting on a brave face each and every single day when I really just wanted to cry. Some days I just couldn't hold back the pain, and some people would notice. And they would just come up and ask, "Oh, you missing your kid?" And I would just say, "Yep," to avoid opening up. Because no one could know that there was any weakness. That's how I lived my whole life. You think I would let myself be vulnerable? No, not me. I continued to work. I continued to work out, do my PT tests, and just act like everything was okay because, of course, there is no weakness over here. And this is another pattern that comes up, a pattern of ignoring my physical health to meet external expectations. Ignoring physical pain and overexertion can lead to long-term health consequences, including chronic pain and stress-related illnesses. And research indicates that individuals with a history of trauma may prioritize external validation over self-care, leading to the neglect of their physical health, not realizing that if they are not at 100%, then they will never be able to give 100% in anything that they try to do. I will say, though, there were actually about 3 people on that deployment who actually gave a damn. And I allowed them to know just enough to be able to go to my appointments, but nobody knew everything. Just like my childhood, I kept everything hidden deep down where no one knew it existed through my smiles, my jokes, and my laughter. And this is often referred to as smiling depression or emotional masking, where people with trauma mask their pain through humor or a cheerful demeanor as a coping mechanism. And it can actually serve several purposes, like avoiding vulnerability because expressing pain can just feel very unsafe, or it can lead to further rejection, or they may have a desire to protect their loved ones from burdening them with their fears and their struggles. And it can also be used as a survival strategy because humor and laughter can provide temporary relief through the release of those happy hormones throughout our bodies. And it can actually help people cope during difficult times. Those happy hormones can even act as a pain reliever. So when you stub your toe or step on one of those stupid Legos, just start laughing and see if it helps. But these are just a few reasons why when someone takes their own life and their family says, we never thought that this would happen. We didn't see this happening. It was so unlike him. He was such a happy kid, always smiling and laughing. Or why so many comedians are people who are severely depressed and they suffer from anxiety and depression. It's just a mask hiding so much pain that people are trying to cover because showing weakness to society is just so frowned upon. And we never know what other people are going through, and it really just costs nothing to be kind. But yeah, so coming home from the deployment, it wasn't as exciting as I thought it would be. I thought that we would get home, get to be with our daughter, and start really living our life again like normal. But man, was I wrong. When we went to go pick up our daughter to bring her home, my precious little baby girl, who was a year and 9 months old, she had absolutely no idea who we were. Even though we FaceTimed her weekly, she was still very young. She had no idea who we were. We flew her all the way from New Jersey back to Texas with her crying. She would look at me and want me, so then my husband would hand her to me, and then she would look at my husband and then want him, so then I would hand her to him, and then we just kept passing her back and forth the whole flight with her crying. And we just missed out on so much of her life. All of you moms out there know what a drastic change it is during this period of your child's life. So we have no idea what we were doing when we got back, what she liked, and we had to learn each other all over again and get into this good routine. It's definitely one of the hardest emotions of my life. My own daughter not knowing who I was. I definitely did not prepare for that in my excellent planning. This deployment was just the beginning of a chapter of my life that, looking back, I just don't think that I was fully ready for. But when you're young and full of life, nothing can stop you. After this deployment, my husband's first enlistment was up. We had discussed thoroughly during deployment our next 5-year plan. He had always wanted to be a pilot ever since I met him, so I said, then why don't you just get out and just become a pilot? We did all the research, and when we got home, he separated from the military and began going to college in order to commission. At this time, there was no programs to go from enlisted to officer, or at least to our knowledge, or to the knowledge of the advisors and the mentors that we seeked out. So he had to separate from the military, graduate college, and then apply to commission and then be chosen to become a pilot. He had some college credits, but he did have to do the typical 4 years. He decided to go to a college that was 2 hours away from where we lived because it was a really good college, and it also had a really good ROTC program that gave him a better chance of commissioning and giving him the resources that he would need to move forward with his plans. It was pretty hard the first few semesters of him driving back and forth to school every single day. So we just decided to get him a small, super cheap one-bedroom apartment near his school. That way he wasn't wasting 4 hours a day just driving, and he could actually have some time to do his schoolwork because driving back and forth just to be home, to scramble, to do his assignments, go to bed, then wake up early and do it all over again, it just really wasn't worth it. Plus, paying for the apartment actually saved us money on the gas that he was spending going back and forth, and it opened up more time for him to actually do his assignments instead of scrambling. It was tough not having him home during the week, but he made sure that he tried to have all of his assignments done for the weekend so that way when he did come home, we could have some family time. This family time ended us expecting our second baby. Unfortunately, we never got to meet that little angel. It was such an intense 5 months for me, going from having one child, not remembering who you are, to losing another. I didn't understand it then how common miscarriages were. You never really understand until you go through one. The supportive women who came out of the woodwork and tell you their story. It doesn't heal the loss, but it does help you feel a little less alone in the process. In the end, I can't be 100% certain about what caused it. Was it the cancerous chemicals that covered my body at work? Was it because my OB failed to give me my RhoGAM shot in time and my body rejected the baby? I don't know, but I knew I had control over one of those, and that's where I worked. So after my miscarriage, word got around to my supervisors, and they had asked me if I wanted to move off of the flight line to an office job to mock. And although I had turned down this job before during my first pregnancy to give someone else who deserved it, not just because I was pregnant, I immediately said yes when it was offered this time. I did not want something like this happening again, and I'm so glad that I did because the following month, we were pregnant once again. I was in complete shock. We weren't even trying, and I didn't even think it would happen that fast. But because of how everything happened with our previous pregnancy, I did not want to tell anyone because I was so afraid of it happening again. Having to tell people when they ask how my pregnancy is going that I lost the baby. I didn't want to put myself through that again. So for 3 months, we kept it a secret until we knew our baby was going to survive. We had a healthy baby boy, and we kept pressing on with life. My husband was still coming home on the weekends. I was the primary parent during the week, and for the first year of my son's life, it was extremely difficult. So difficult that my mom had to come down and help me for a few weeks at a time. My son had an issue where anytime he would eat, he would projectile vomit his food, sometimes from the night previous, and a lot of it just didn't make a lot of sense. We went through 4 pediatricians, a gastro, to finally figure out what was wrong with him. Each pediatrician that we worked with told me, "You're a new mom, baby spit up," and then I would have to explain to them that, one, I'm not a new mom, this is my second child, and that I would have to carry an extra uniform in my car, along with 3 sets of clothes for my son, wipes and garbage bags to clean up the vomit that comes up from behind my seat, over my shoulder, in my hair, onto my steering wheel, and down into his car seat. I actually had to buy an extra car seat because one was always being washed in the washer and one was in the car at all times. But they all thought that I was being over dramatic. So I lived like that for a whole year, and my poor son had to go through that for a whole year. Getting the glaring eye for walking in a few minutes late because I was in a parking lot changing in my car trying to clean up vomit so I wouldn't stink. One day I took my son to see the pediatrician because he was having a really bad coughing fit, and they sent us home saying he was coughing because of allergies, and then we came back the next day because it wasn't better. We got sent home again saying there was nothing wrong with him, that I was being overprotective, and that he just had seasonal allergies and a small cough, and there was nothing they could do about it. But come on, Moms, we know when our child is acting normal and when they are not. And not to mention, my kid is acting not normal on top of not acting normal, with the whole year of projectile vomiting and having to supplement his food with Pediasure so he can get the nutrients that he needs. Then you're going to tell me that I'm being an overprotective new mom and send me home. Well, I wasn't healed yet, and I didn't really know how to stand up for myself yet, let alone another person. Yes, even my child. I already did everything that I could do with the doctor, so I didn't know what else to do. So what did I do? I just went home pissed off until my son began to have intense coughing fits to the point where he wasn't breathing properly. So I brought him to the emergency room. They found 11 things wrong with him. Fluid in his lungs, pneumonia, bacteria, infections. I was so livid. We were finally referred to a gastro who performed surgery, and that boy gained so much weight in the first couple months after surgery. For a whole year, I struggled to keep my child healthy because trained medical professionals, 4 of them, did not take me seriously. A whole year, my son was malnourished and suffered. All while I was getting flack at work for having to leave early to pick up my son from daycare because of his consistent fevers, then having to stay home with him until he was 24 hours fever-free, having my supervisors ask, why can't your husband pick him up or stay home with him? And I can't even tell you how many times I told people my situation. And I told them to basically consider me as a single mom because my husband either lived 2 to 4 hours away, depending on the time period, and could not get our kids from daycare or from school. God forbid flu season rolled around because I would have one kid out and then the next one would get sick. And so that's when I would have to fly my mom down to help. But I would just be harassed with the questions of, when is your mom going to be here so you can get to work? And here's the thing. I would completely understand if I wasn't doing my job or if I was behind in my work because of all of this. But I was still working from home. I would still take the work phone home and be working, taking calls, making updates, and getting my job done as if I was in the office. But I was consistently being nagged about my presence. I mean, I know that I'm kind of an awesome person, but all of y'all can't get through a day without me here. It's like, then to top it off, you think that I would have learned by now where babies come from, but we weren't preventing nor were we trying, but we ended up getting pregnant once again. And as if being pregnant, raising children practically by myself and working weren't enough, of course I had to make sure that I was good at my job too. So trying my best to climb up the ranks and career ladder was a must. I studied because I needed that external validation. So I studied and I tested and I made staff sergeant or E5, which I was super excited about because being the sole provider for your family is a lot of pressure. And honestly, it's a lot of responsibility. So a pay raise was exactly what I needed to take a little bit of that pressure off, especially with another little one on the way. And a part of this new rank meant that I had to go to ALS or Airman Leadership School, where they taught you how to be a leader and manage your troops. It was just about a month of academics, which earned you some college credits. So it was a few days before the first day of class, and I was at work, and I went into the bathroom, and there was blood. I was a little over 3 months pregnant at this point, and I just remember just trying not to cry because I was trying to convince myself that everything was okay. I was over 3 months, the baby should be fine. But as soon as I walked back out into my office, I burst into tears. I knew something was wrong. I knew something was off. And I told my supervisor, and he said, "Do you think you're going to be okay?" And I told him that I was trying not to worry, and if I was having a miscarriage, that honestly, there was nothing I could do about it anyway. My shift was almost over. I was just going to kind of see what happened. That night I had to go to the ER because the pain that had started. And again, my intuition was right. I was losing another baby. This time they had to do a D&C, and I'm not going to get too much into detail here, but I was lucky enough to have a caring supervisor at that time who actually cared about his airmen. So he told me to take that Thursday and Friday off and that he was going to call to cancel my spot in the class and to just show up to work on Monday. So I could just do Thursday, Friday off and have the healing Saturday, Sunday. Guys, I'm telling you, I don't know what is wrong with me at that time. Like, I had no idea what was wrong with me. I told him no. Please don't cancel my class. I want to go. Please, I just want everything to keep going like normal. He was very hesitant, but he said that he would reach out to the school and let them know about my situation and that I would still be in my maternity blues for the graduation because that's what I prepped for. And if you don't know, your body doesn't magically go back down to normal size after a miscarriage, especially after 3 months. Well, it's more than 3 months, but I stubbornly went to class that next Monday. Most of the bleeding had slowed down, so it was manageable. The cramping was a different story, but on the first day, they laid out all the ground rules. They asked for profiles. Profiles are just documents stating that you can't partake in physical fitness. So it wasn't really hard to see that between my maternity uniform and my profile that I was probably pregnant. I got picked to be class leader, which I really wasn't too happy about just because I wanted to get through this class and graduate and just kind of fly under the radar. But there were a few significant things that happened in this short amount of time during this class that really stick with me today. First was absolute complete embarrassment. As I had said, my bleeding had been manageable at this point. We were outside under the hot Texas sun, marching around. And when we came inside, my classroom was on the second floor. And I remember all of us running up the stairs. And so I headed to the bathroom before going into the classroom. And I don't know what happened, but the amount of blood that was soaked all the way down about 6 inches below my inseam of my pants, it was just everywhere. And there was no cleaning it, like not in those uniforms. And we were starting instruction soon. Not to mention, I just ran upstairs in front of a whole bunch of people who literally said nothing to me. And there's no possible way that nobody saw it. Unless they thought maybe because I was pregnant that somehow I shit myself and didn't want to say something to embarrass me. But I was completely embarrassed. Yes. Embarrassed of my body doing what it needed to do to heal. Another one of those big emotions I felt during this time was frustration. The whole time, my classmates made jokes and made fun, which they would have been fine if my pregnancy was okay. But given my circumstances, every time they said something, I would fight back the tears. I know that they didn't know. Even when they would come in and say, "Hey, Mama, how you feeling today?" I would want to just burst out in tears. Until one day in a coffee shop during study session, I did burst out. I had held it in long enough. A comment was made and I just said, "Can you please just stop saying that I'm pregnant? Like, I'm not pregnant anymore. Like, I had a miscarriage. Like, can everyone just stop?" And everyone just kind of stopped and stared at me. And I just told them what was going on. And I told them, please don't say you're sorry. There's nothing that any of you guys can do. You guys didn't know it happened. I'm dealing with it. I'm as okay as I'm going to be. So let's just finish out this class and not talk about it and move on. And everyone actually honored my request, which was really nice for a change. The final thing that stuck with me during this time was there was this silly exercise that we had to do at the end of this class before graduation where we had to identify everyone with a type of t-shirt, like, a polo, a Hawaiian shirt, a tank top. And I picked for myself a Hawaiian shirt because I thought, I like to have fun. Plus, I like Hawaii. But I heard the answers from all of my classmates, and I was just kind of in complete disbelief and shock because they all chose the muscle shirt for me. And at first I was so confused. 'Cause I'm like, what the heck? What the muscle shirt? I wasn't yet a gym enthusiast at the time. And when we got together outside of work, I never wore gym attire. So I was like so confused. I'm like, the muscle shirt, what? But they all began to say that they picked that shirt because of my strength. And I have never been so thrown off, but in a good way. I never thought that people would have ever seen me in that kind of way as in a position of strength. But they just kept saying how strong I was and what a good leader I was. And it kind of started to change how I saw myself just a little bit. Like a little spark of light ignited within me that said, hey, you know what? You're not a complete failure. Look, people think you're doing okay. So a few months went by, and what do you know? Little Miss Fertile Myrtle, again, knocked up. We did get to meet this little fireball, this beautiful, sassy little girl, but not before having an emergency C-section where they had to completely put me out because my epidural failed. When they pushed me back into the room, I moved myself onto the table and they were all just kind of like, you're not supposed to be able to do that. And I was like, well, I did. And so the doctor came in, started cutting, and I felt everything. I started to scream, saying, please, please, please stop cutting. I feel it. I feel it. I feel it. And he said, you shouldn't be feeling anything. And then he started to cut again, and I started to scream again. I'm like, please stop, please stop. And he said, okay. Like, he was so surprised. He's like, okay, she can feel it. Like, and then he signaled to one of the people in the room, and he came over with a vial of something, and then I was out. And I just remember fighting for my life. Waking up, peeking my eyes open, going back to fighting for my life. Opening my eyes, being in pain, trying to ask my husband if the baby was okay, hearing him say yes, and then kind of like passing back out and like slamming my head back down onto the pillow, and I was gone again, fighting for my life. Waking up another time, hearing my mother-in-law yelling at a nurse for not giving me my pain medication yet because the nurse said she was going to wait until I woke up to give it to me, and then passing out again. And, that, my friends, that was a wild ride that I do not recommend to anyone. It was definitely a wild roller coaster ride. And speaking of roller coaster rides, thank you all for joining me on this one today. That is about all the time that we have for today, so we will end it here. Remember, life is full of ups and downs, but it is all about how we navigate through those twists and turns. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and follow. And if you don't want to miss an episode, download my free app to be notified every Monday when a new episode is released. Links are in the description. Until next time, everyone, keep bridging those gaps and don't forget to laugh along the way.